One thing that just, I think for me would be unreal is like taking a history class where you like put on goggles and like get transported to 3rd century like Byzantine Empire or like Rome or something like that. That is just like, to me, like such a better learning experience than reading a textbook.
Welcome to the Style is Free podcast. I am your host, Brett Leibowitz. Today we have Max Shatkin with us, a CS graduate student here at Cornell Tech with me and also a fellow Princeton alum. We're going to start it off with a quote and get right into it. So here we go. So if we're really to have any hope as a country, we need to find a way to connect people and engender solidarity. That's from Lydia Paulgreen, of the editor-in-chief of HuffPost. So I used to work at the New York Times. So I'm in this tech media democracy class, and it's all about kind of how journalism, I guess, is in a very weird place right now. Their business model is being flipped on their head with all this access to anyone being journalism. There's a lot of issues with fake news and no one really checking sources. What she was talking about, Lydia, was building platforms in order to help make these things better. So we'll be working on different little hackathons, basically creating products to either help journalists dissuade from fake news. So one of the interesting things that one of the guys said, to have people put the revenue that you get from an article, put that in escrow until it's proven to not be fake news, basically. And then you get your money. So it's people don't get paid if the thing's fake, then I don't know where the money would go if it is, and maybe pay for
if you think about Kickstarter, right? You don't actually get charged until like the pledge is met or something like that. It's like a promise.
So it's saying the advertisers would not be charged, but they're still getting ads, though. There's still ad revenue coming from fake news. It's very interesting that the old media companies don't know what to do, like their business model is being flipped, but why is fake news making money then? One of my thoughts is for a platform or something, like I like Reddit a lot, where you take a bunch of sources from different places and are able to view that and comment and things like that. I'll just go into the comment section most of the time, like read a headline and people will say, oh, this is bullshit, or this doesn't make sense, or this part of it is true, or the summary bots. And she was talking about like a free platform for stuff, so I could see you have some sort of platform that brings in a bunch of news from a bunch of different places. You subscribe to New York Times or like certain topics, maybe kind of how Reddit does, and you get that content for free, and they split up ad revenue to different sources based off how many views or comments or stuff like that, how good the article actually is, and maybe they keep the money or something if it's fake news, or like they get penalized in some way.
And any idea that you use to like fight fake news, it's very tough to like have some like ultimate arbiter of like whether this is fake or not. Yes. Which is like I think a big thing that like Facebook is going through over the last years. Well, who are they to like classify something as fake or not, right? Like that isn't any better than like them letting people like see fake news. Dissuasion from fake news has to be like a social pressure, like if you publish fake news and it's proven to be fake, there's some kind of low Uber rating, you know, like you get a bad Uber rating, and so like now you lose credibility as like someone posting it. In order for that to be effective, like whenever an article is posted, you would have to like say this was written by this person with a like fake news rating of whatever. What percentage of journalism is like that open about the writer?
I feel like a lot of people buy, like it'll do the article name and then buy whoever. I feel like most of it is not anonymized, especially opinion pieces, but even more so like real they like attribution to their work. Yeah. And I don't think the anonymity would be a problem. I think what would be interesting is to keep that from being politicized, right? Like how do you get a really nonpartisan group of people to review, like a third party to review this stuff and have verification that it's fake or not, and like what defines fake news? There's a ton of sensational news. The recent presidential election in 2016 was very much focused on that. Like you could tell, depending on what news source an article came from, even reputable ones like New York Times, even if it's real, there's definitely an agenda behind what they're saying. And is that considered fake news, that they're pushing their own agenda? Because I would feel like most news sources are, and that's kind of a problem, which is why there is opportunity for like independent news sources to come up and actually have truth found in things and get like facts and figures, as opposed to more like trying to sway people. It's obviously more so in politics and stuff related to political like things, but it's interesting, like how do you make sure that rating's accurate? 'Cause you can't just like poll random people to say like, oh, is this true or not? Because people will just lean toward what they want to be true, which is the current problem.
But so it's interesting. you're talking about this like decision-making process from like, you say it should be like a nonpartisan group. I think that like political leaning is a part of it, but you also mentioned Reddit. Have you seen one of the recent Reddit articles called Deep Fakes?
No.
Someone made an app called Fake App. You can supply a video of someone and then a bunch of pictures of someone's face, and it literally seamlessly, like you cannot tell, it implants the new face onto the person in the video. Mm-hmm. And you can't tell that it's like that it's a different person unless like you know the person's face and you're like, oh, this is not them. Where that will lead is that like it's not only like a nonpartisan group of people that need to decide whether this is fake or not. It's like advanced algorithms and like a group of technical team that needs to be also on board with this to figure out if this like news is doctored by an algorithm, because I think that a lot of fake news in the future will be like from some kind of like intelligent machine spitting out a news story or something.
Right. No, that's very interesting, because I haven't seen that exact link, but I have seen things like, here's Nicolas Cage in every movie ever. Like, just replace the main characters with Nicolas Cage.
Right.
And they're the ones where you make facial expressions, and it'll make, like, George Bush do the facial expressions on a news story. So I'm surprised it hasn't quite been a problem yet. Maybe it's too new, but I definitely see, like, authenticity of not just reporting on news, but actual, like, video of news, because we're not used to that yet. And, like, how can you trust if anything's real at this point? Like, it's not even like CGI where there's a dragon or something, but actually you can make a video of someone doing anything you want. Like, think of, there was a huge thing where they drew like Muhammad in a cartoon. Yeah. You remember? I can't remember the name of that place, but and there was I think terrorist attacks.
I think it was in London.
And yeah. Forget the news arc. We need someone on the computer in the background, like looking up stuff for us. But imagine you could do that with any political figure, any religious figure, any sort of, you can make a mockery of anyone, nude photos, like, to an extreme. So that's another way technology is entering journalism and news media in general. Yeah,
it's a bit scary because, like, facts are accessible in today's day. It's just, it takes, like, a little bit of effort to, like, you know, do some Google search or whatever. As, like, the kind of doctoring of the like evidence, of hard evidence becomes like more advanced. Like now we're taking, you know, a step back into like fake news, where it's not just like, here are facts and like here's the like the fake or the wrong interpretation of fact. It's like, what are facts, right? Like we're going one step backward. So I think that opens up a lot of opportunity for innovation on this front. But you mentioned in the beginning, like, what is the business model for something like this? Like, I guess, I mean, you would sell it to, like, institutions that, like, want to, like, promote the truth. So, like, media organizations, something like that. Yeah. But how do they, you know? Well,
they also want to promote their truth and, like, what they want to get there. That's what I think is very interesting about media. There's a lot of different companies, not just media, but it's all getting to be owned by a few people. Right? Like, some, I forget all the names, but CNN, like, there's a whole group of stuff that's owned under one person. Yeah. So if they have something that they want to be pushed, they can, like, trickle that down to support their needs or support whatever that they want to have happen from legislative standpoint, like common what they want people to think standpoint. And I think the problem kind of has to arise first before people start paying to sway to it. You can't, it's like here's insurance for something that doesn't exist yet, but it is existing, and like they can do it in real time too, which is that I was just running through, like, maybe you have stuff on the blockchain that proves that it's this exact moment and it's like authenticated at that, but you can do it in real time. Like, what's to stop? How do you actually authenticate something? Like, unless you have a live tracker that you can guarantee is not being like manipulated, like a live camera on your body, like a police body cam at all times. That's like guaranteed software that's not manipulatable. Right. That you can go and be like, as an alibi, call it alibi, like, as the product.
No, I saw him in the One Credit blockchain course, and in the very first class, he asked us to come up with an idea for digital signatures. The one that I used was like a academic transcript digital signature. Like, universities could like digitally sign your transcripts so that when you're applying to employers or like other schools, it can be like verified that you come from there. But after the class or near the end of it, I thought, like, what if you had your geolocation digitally signed and like uploaded to the blockchain, and then like in the event of like a crime, you have an alibi, you have like a verified like location to where you were. You don't need to rely on like witnesses.
Yeah, but then that also goes into privacy as well, right?
Sure.
Because that's a huge issue. My theory on that's always been like, if laws were just, it wouldn't be a problem. But with all this data being recorded and people can mine data in the future to like make it look like they can go after you for doing something that maybe is illegal, maybe not, but like they can pinpoint on you. Like I like looking at like marijuana being illegal, cannabis being illegal. That like there's a good percent of people who have at some point possessed cannabis on their person. Like a large percent that you couldn't even like jail everyone for like that happening. But if you were able to record everything and you wanted to go after a specific person doing a crime like that, like, oh, they had this on, they did one illegal thing that we know, and it's just like, are those laws just? Is it? I think laws are kind of made that, oh, here's like harsh penalties that if it like they'll get away with it 99 times or more, and like the one time we get them, it makes up for all that, and it's like an averaging out situation.
Yeah.
So it's just laws. I like that idea. Like I think privacy. I like respecting privacy, but like it also helps on a tech standpoint. Like they're clashing constantly.
But the nice thing about blockchain, right, is that like maybe not blockchain, but digital signatures, is that you can upload this data and it's all out there, but there's no connection between this data point and you as like a physical person.
Mm-hmm.
At least there's no explicit connection. There are like algorithms that you can run to like kind of like imply like if you knew this person was like here, here, and here at like these different times, you could probably sift through the data and like predict like, all right, this like hash is this actual person.
Right.
And so now every time you see this hash, right? But like other than that, they don't know it's you unless you give your private key. From a law perspective, laws have to change with like as technology is changing. Maybe like it will be unlawful for a judge to make you give up your private key, you know, unless there's like a warrant or something like that.
The thing that's interesting to me about security and like crypto security is that most hacking nowadays is people phishing your stuff. Like it doesn't matter how good like this private key security is, if they can get access to that private key, like by you sent, it's like when the DNC Podesta guy's email hacked, he was phished. Like he sent it to his like tech guy, and he's like, oh yeah, that's an email from Google, and they got their password that way. It's not like in the movies where someone's hacking on a computer, breaking into databases. It's like most of the time it's someone giving that information up accidentally. And so it seems that you need like an educated populace to, even then maybe not, like educate on that you need to hold this private key, and like what about losing your private key and stuff like that. So no matter how good the security is in the back end, like making it not accessible to someone, not able to give it up, because I feel like it's more the human error that stuff gets compromised as opposed to the actual technology behind it, like stored in a database, stored in a blockchain.
On this topic of like law and tech, I went to a talk this past week she's a professor at UNC, but
Mm-hmm.
she also is she writes for like I think the tech column in the New York Times. She was talking about how our current laws. She was talking about kind of like bias and like prejudice in how like that is to some extent like forbidden in our current laws, but it's forbidden in a way that like assumes that a human is doing the like is being prejudiced, and so like discriminating based off like race, which is something that like a human can see easily, right? Or like physical disability, stuff like that. Current algorithms and like current like prediction algorithms and like, you know, a lot of machine learning algorithms that are used to like optimize, like she was giving the example of like hiring. Companies are starting to use like hiring algorithms to like optimize employee intake. But it's very possible that this algorithm is being prejudiced against, you know, mothers who are pregnant or something like that, right? Because the amount of data that it sees is a lot more diverse than like the data that a human would see. And so like under the hood, you might not know it, but like it is being prejudiced against a group of people. It's just not it's not anywhere like explicitly stated in the law that like you can't be prejudiced against like, you know, this person with like this thing, you know.
Right. It's unintentional racism.
Right.
Or bigotry.
Maybe not racism, but yeah, some kind of prejudice.
Yeah.
Companies that are using this are like, they know that like their algorithms can be biased, but again, they're looking at the bias to make sure that like it's not racially biased or it's not this. And there's no kind of like flow down requirement from the government, from the law, that's like protecting different aspects, different dimensions of humans.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a very interesting, like how do we move forward with like changing the law in light of this?
No, that's interesting. I think like, going back to what you were first saying, something I think very interesting about government is like how slowly it moves.
Yeah.
If you compare that to how the tech industry moves, like everyday software, within a year, things can be totally different. I work on web development. That's open source. People are changing stuff, new libraries all the time. Like about deep learning and all the machine learning, everything's advancing so fast, and we're using a government system that maybe a few hundred years old that hasn't really advanced and like definitely doesn't have the trajectory to keep up or advance that fast. Yeah. So, and it's like the amount, how long it takes for laws to happen. Like you need a lot of sessions, and like there's reasons for it and against it, but yeah, it's super interesting to see how technology like goes off at a much faster rate than laws, and see if laws can keep up with that. And we need to figure out ways in order to like make those kind of in line, especially how much tech is taking over.
Yeah.
And an interesting point, what you were saying, I took networks and markets with Raphael Pass last semester. And one of the things, a very similar concept, he was saying that, okay, like you have a product and you have an algorithm that's allowed to give discounts to certain people because it thinks that these people will actually make a purchase if they were getting this discount code based off of any sort of like their past like purchase history or what they're into. Are you allowed to do this? Like, would it be morally okay that your algorithm happens to target like only a certain type of people, or like only a certain type of people don't get your discount? So like you would think naturally, like, yeah, like, you're just trying to maximize value. Like people give discounts all the time in order to like make more sales. So like at what point do you have to like watch that and manage that? And like are there like systemic things or other factors that would cause like a group of people to be discriminated against? And like how do you, like that's even more like philosophical. Like how do you make laws for this AI technology? Because like we see that's something wrong, but like how do you even fix that based off how things work already?
Yeah, I mean, and there are multiple dimensions of this. Like there's the like whose fault is it? If there is prejudice, right? If like some kind of prejudice is found, or like an example, like a kind of obvious example, like a self-driving car makes a decision that kills a human.
Right.
Where's the responsibility lie? Is it like with the corporation? Is it with the engineer? There's a lot of things here, and then like and also like you mentioned, like flowing down regulations, and it's not even it's difficult because it's a conversation that has to be had with the people developing these algorithms, right? Because like a government can be like, all right, well, you can't racially discriminate. If that just like blanket like regulation is like flowed down to these like machine learning algorithm engineers, that's not an easy thing to do. It's like there are ways that like prevent an algorithm from like predicting the same class like multiple times, but it's like a little bit of a hack. And I think there's like a well-known, like if you've heard of like the 3 laws of robotics from like iRobot.
It's been a while, but yeah.
It's like the first law is like you can't harm a human. The second law is like you have to listen to anything a human tells you to do. And the third law is like if you don't conflict with the first 2 laws, then like protect yourself.
Right.
But I think there's been like several articles where it's almost impossible to in these algorithms to like set these like hard rules. There are infinite number of ways to interpret, reinterpret these rules that it's like very difficult to kind of just say like these are rules that you can't break. Mm-hmm. And so this is definitely like a conversation, that needs to be had with lawmakers, technologists, and I think that like it's happening.
Yeah,
definitely. I mean, and I think Cornell Tech is actually a great place where this kind of conversation is happening and starting. It seems like a insurmountable like
right. Like how do you actually accomplish that goal? Like we know the problem even if people were all on board and ready for it. And have you heard of A16Z podcast with Andreessen Horowitz's podcast? Probably about a year ago or so, they had a section where they went to Washington, interviewed government. That's what I liked about them. They think about all these different things and very cross-disciplinary. And there are committees, like there are caucuses, I believe they're called, like trying to work with the tech companies and figure these types of things out. But which is good at least. Like it gives me hope that they're looking at it. Yeah, even if you have everyone on the same page with the right intentions. There's so much other background noise, like you even forgot about all that. So it's a hard problem.
Yeah,
and
like you said, it's harder because of how fast things are moving. That even because of that even brings into like another dimension into this, and like, can you ask companies to slow down, right? Like, to what extent can you like ask a company to forego profits in order for like, government to catch up, basically? Maybe not in those terms, but like
it amounts to that.
Yeah, it kind of amounts to that, right? Like, we don't have like a real hold as how to like solve some of these like societal issues. It seems like ethically dubious from like a corporation's perspective to like keep going forward full steam.
No, we were talking about open source before, like who's held accountable if you have this repo that people use, if that gets popular. Yeah, no, and like with self-driving cars, I think one of the most interesting things is insurance, like how that will change. A lot of people are like, oh, like people don't like self-driving cars, they like driving, which like, yeah, like maybe it'll be a weird transition period, but I think the fact that you'll have to pay less insurance, like, is a huge adoption factor.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. Like, they don't know, like, no one really knows, like, how that's going to work. Like, maybe there's people working on it with ideas and people looking at it in these fields, but it's really up in the air. And yeah, with all these algorithms that you're talking about, artificial intelligence and machine learning, it's like you need analysis on how these are working to see if there's discrimination involved.
Yeah.
And why I'm a little pessimistic about it is today, like with certain laws, we can see discrimination that like people, like certain demographics get arrested for certain types of crimes at multiple times higher for this, like doing the same rate of the crime, and especially like why certain laws have come into existence. It's very interesting with government, and I feel like on a large scale, like on like the federal and national or international scale, it's a lot of corruption involved, like crony capitalism, which involves like capitalism, corporations as well. Like maybe regulations are being put into play, but they're for self-interest as opposed to the common interest of people.
It's like a never-ending set of trade-offs. Corporations want to optimize profits, which like kind of like takes care of their shareholders and also like pumps like, innovation and like money into the economy. There needs to be a line of like influence into the government sector. When you like talk about this line, it's like, all right, is this a violation of free speech? It's like why democracy is so like complex, right?
Right. And we're like technically a republic, right? Like we don't vote on everything.
Sure.
Like we have these representatives who are supposed to vote like for the people, but there's definitely obvious incongruencies that they vote for their self-interest, or you can see who their donors are, or like you can't even see who, like with all these super PACs and everything, you can't see where the money's coming from. So maybe even just making it transparent, would that help the situation? There's a lot of different ways, but it's definitely obvious that it's kind of out of touch with making it best for the individual.
People used to complain about how like politicians were like only interested in re-election.
Right.
While that like seems bad, I think that like it's not a bad thing, because like re-election is like your accountability to the people, right? Like you are elected by the people, and so like if your main goal is re-election, you will like do what the people want, right? Like you won't do what like you think is right, maybe, which there's like pluses and minuses there,
right.
But like you'll be doing what your job is, which is like what the people want. Whereas like nowadays, there's been like a lot of studies in that like politicians are still focused on re-election, but re-election is now much more a factor of how much money these large corporations or these interest groups can give you, and that's a much larger factor now. And so now this like accountability to the people is lost.
Right.
There's still the same incentive for re-election, but now there's a new kind of stakeholder.
Yeah, and re-election is very interesting because, like, regardless of all that, it's half their time spent making calls and doing fundraisers and getting this money into play. So they're not even working on politics most of the time. It's just the system that they're in, that they have to raise all this money in order. Running campaigns are expensive.
Yeah.
And like it's very difficult to do it without that. And so like, how do you combat that even? Yeah, and there holds the donors. Something I like about technology and the internet fantastic invention. Like,
Agreed.
Is people can have so much information at their fingertips that they can see if politicians are going for like what they say. Like, I guess going back to media and stuff, back in the day when only like there's still only a few companies, but back in the day there was like even less. Like you got your news from the TV, you got your news from the newspaper. Like there's only so much like place you get your media from, right. And that's where you could make the determination. Now with the internet, there's open discussion. You're actually hearing, like if you want, like not everyone wants to hear it, which is part of the problem, but you can, if you want to, you can go out and have a conversation with someone and figure out why. Like if you don't just go in there with like a sports-like bias that's your team or something like that, you can go and figure out stuff and see why someone would think a certain way. And so something with like the Me Too and like how Hollywood is being outed for doing wrong things, and like now it's like going to different industries, like politicians, everywhere. Like people are having a voice again where they're seeing stuff that are wrong and actually combating it. It doesn't always work, but in a lot of cases it's really showing that we want good people in power. We want people that it doesn't matter how good they are at their job or what they're doing, how good of movies they make, or how much money they're bringing to something. Like we want people who don't abuse their power. Yeah. And so hopefully that trend continues in a good way to support like the continuation of that.
One can hope.
One can hope. So yeah, hopefully the open internet that would happen. Yeah. So something I wanted to pick your brain on this podcast was deep learning. In your own words, how would you describe deep learning? Like, what is it, so the viewers know, or I guess listeners know?
So there are two kind of large umbrella terms that describe like intelligent algorithms today, and like there's like machine learning and there's artificial intelligence, and there's probably different definitions for like what these are. Most people would agree they're kind of like overlapping spheres.
Right.
So like machine learning is used in artificial intelligence for a lot of the like learning from data side, but it's also kind of like a fancy term for like data analysis.
Right.
Right. So like your standard like logistic regression analysis is like fits under the machine learning umbrella to a certain extent. Whereas AI again like uses machine learning and like intersects with that for an agent to like learn from like past examples from history, from data. But there's also a lot more to AI than just like machine learning. There's like a lot of like world formulation questions, like how do I take the outside world and like formulate it into a current state, and then like how do I make the best like action in that state. And so there's a whole like the control theory side of things. So deep learning, I don't know if I could put it like succinctly into like one of these two camps. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's within machine learning, but it's also used by the AI community a lot, and it's essentially a enhancement of a machine learning algorithm called neural networks. Mm-hmm. And so neural networks were like invented, I think, in like the 60s or like thought of. And they were a couple, I think they'd been through one or two like cycles where like first everyone was like hot on them, and then they proved to not be very efficient. AI winter, neural network winter or something like that. And recently they've started coming back into kind of the limelight, mostly because of three different like factors. One is computational power. We just have like GPUs and processing units like that can process like a lot more data a lot faster now than even 10 years ago. A lot more data. There's just like a lot more sensors that store a lot of data.
Right. Internet of Things.
Yeah, Internet of Things is like only just beginning. Also like a little bit of improvement in algorithms, and so like this algorithm I think is where like this deep learning thing comes in. And so basically, neural networks are like loosely motivated by like how your neurons in your brain work, mm-hmm. in the sense that they have like a bunch of inputs from like other neurons, and then there's like one output, and it feeds to neurons. And so there's like some kind of function that takes in this collection of inputs and spits out an output. And if you combine a bunch of these together, they model very complex things. If you think about how like Fourier analysis, like you put a bunch of like sine waves together, and you can come up with like any function you want. Mm-hmm. This is like kind of like that, where like you put a bunch of nonlinearities together, and they can model almost any function, like an extremely complex function. And so this process of like figuring out what this function is the learning part, right? So it's like a lot of like input data and it's like the inputs and the outputs, and like the model itself like learns through this process of like backpropagation.
Yeah, you're basically like putting a function with a bunch of inputs into another function with a bunch of inputs, and eventually you get the output result from that.
Right, and and if you have like what the output should be, it's then kind of just an optimization problem, right? Like, here's what my current output is. I know what the output should be. How do I minimize that loss?
Right. So your training set where you can actually like change the weights on your functions and stuff like that in order. If you have that data, you can figure that out and then keep using that, and maybe even using the new data to update your algorithms to make it better. Yeah.
So it's all like, if your objective function of this optimization problem is like true output minus like predicted output. This process of backpropagation is essentially you take the derivative of that loss function. The derivative of the predicted output is itself a function of all these weights. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of use a chain rule to figure out, what the derivative of the loss as a function of each weight is, and then you use that, the chain rule to get yourself the update. And there's different parameters and stuff. So that's kind of like a basic neural network. These deep learning networks, people have come up with like different architectures that seem to work well on like certain types of data. So for image data, or conversely like time series data stacked kind of like an image, there are these kind of algorithms called convolutional neural networks. They take like this kernel and they like sweep it over like your image. It tries to map kind of this like 3x3 or like whatever your kernel size is. It tries to map like what's in there to an output. That was, I think, like first invented for MNIST, or like first used to kind of solve MNIST, which is like digit recognition, like handwritten digit recognition.
Right, like 0 through 9, figuring out what number people are writing with their hands.
Right, exactly. And so that was like, I think one of the first like big applications for that was like handwritten check scanning.
Right, yeah. People use their phones to take an image of your check. That's how the computer, like your bank actually says the right number, so you're getting the right amount of money deposited. So you don't have to go to the bank, go to the ATM, to the teller, deposit your stuff, get your money. Just get it right away. Yeah.
I think in ATMs, I think they started using this technology. So like when you put in your check.
So before it was on the mobile, like consumer application, that's how the ATMs were figuring it out. So you didn't have to go to the teller.
Right.
Now you can just do it anywhere. Take a picture. Forget if you actually uploaded this check yet. Get a call from your bank that you already did this. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it like worked surprisingly. Like
I'm always surprised. I'm wondering how much they use the handwritten, because there's like three. You have the handwritten like 403 cents, and then you have the actual numbers.
Right.
So it has like some, and then it has, is this right? They have all the confirmations there for you.
I think it probably uses the numbers.
I would say mostly, yeah.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, I don't know. I think that it maybe like reads the words. I think that's a harder problem.
If it knew your handwriting enough, maybe that would be easier. But to get everyone's, I guess that's the problem. Like what MNIST tries to solve is how to get a random person writing a digit. There's only 9 of them as opposed to 26 letters that you can write in cursive or manuscript. Yeah.
Higher dimensional problem with like characters as opposed to digits. I think that was like the beginning. And I'm not like an expert on deep learning history, but like from what I have learned, that was like one of the beginning applications for convolutional neural networks. Somewhat recently, or like sometime after that, or maybe before, I don't know, there are these kind of networks called recurrent neural networks, which are, whereas a convolutional neural network kind of looked at the spatial parts of input data, recurrent neural network looks at the time series aspect of data. And so if you think about it, like in a convolutional neural network, the weights of a spatial part of an image or of an input are tied together. It's something called like spatial invariance. Whereas in recurrent neural networks, if you have a series of inputs that correspond to different time steps, your like nth time step is connected to your nth minus 1, your n minus 2, and all the way back to your first time step. You're tying weights together across time. And so that allows you, that's used a lot in like text data. where it's not really time, but like the chronological order.
Like when I texted something 3 texts ago, that's more likely to show up than if I texted something a year ago.
Or even just like in a sentence, right? I see this word, I want to relate it back to the words before it.
Right, the context, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like doing that on my phone. I get like 3 options. I'm like, yes. Yeah, I gotta like see how many I can go with like making the sentence I want.
Yeah, exactly.
And it makes it easier instead of having to type it all out. That's cool. So what do you see, we did a lot of the technology and how it works. Like, what do you see as like applications? Like, what are your favorite, because I know we talked about it already a little bit with like different tech and media and government. Like, what are your favorite, like you're looking forward to uses that aren't quite there yet, or maybe like they're just starting?
Yeah, so I think self-driving cars is like an obvious answer, but it's also like something that like I would just love to see. Just personally, like when I worked at Lockheed Martin for 2 years after Princeton, I had my first year I had an hour commute to and from work.
Oh wow, yeah.
And then my second year it was a little bit better, but it was still like half an hour. And you know, I got into podcasts, which was like a nice like kind of byproduct of having that long of a commute.
Podcasts are great.
Yeah, exactly. It still was like the biggest inefficiency of my day.
Right.
And so just the thought that like it's not only going to make things like easier for humans and free up time, but like it's also going to make it safer, I think is huge. So like deep learning plays a large role in like these self-driving cars from the like perception standpoint. So like I want to perceive, the car rather needs to perceive what's around it. And so that uses a lot of deep learning. I don't know to what extent like decision making uses deep learning. I think probably not a lot in cars.
So what does it use it for? You're saying perceiving, just like image recognition?
I think a lot of it is image recognition, right? Image would be if like you're using cameras, 2D cameras. A lot of these cars have to use at least 2 cameras where like you create this stereo. So basically you get depth. Yeah. So they either use 2 cameras which are a fixed distance apart, and like because that you know that distance, you can kind of figure out based on the changes.
How far you don't rear end the car in front of you.
Yeah. That gives you some accuracy of like depth. Most teams working on self-driving cars use an extra sensor, whether it's like LiDAR, which is like laser or radar, which is an active sensor, which means that like it actively sends out a pulse and waits for a response. Whereas cameras are passive, right? Because they're not sending anything out. They're just like extracting information from the world. These LiDAR sensors,
it's more like bats and echolocation. You like send the thing out and you can kind of see what's around it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Any like futuristic robot vision that you see, like send out a little bloop and you can see what's around you.
Yeah, I mean like that's what radar basically is. Just like different.
The lasers are cooler to use. Yeah,
LiDAR is just like a different. They just do the same thing with lasers.
Yeah,
I think that's one big application for deep learning, which I can't wait for. So if we break it down into kind of the different like technologies, there's a lot of vision applications. I think Amazon Go, what they're doing with like kind of redesigning the supermarket experience, I think is going to be cool. It's more of a convenience. Like I'd like to think of like technologies that actually help society.
Right, impact consumer like a large scale.
Yeah, or just maybe not even like first world consumers, but like third world consumers as well. I think the
majority of the population.
Yeah. I think so. Machine translation is a cool application where like you can speak to someone of a different language, and if like you both have access to this algorithm, it'll be able to like in real time translate like your sentences into the language of someone else. So I think that's huge. That like increases communication. You don't have this like Tower of Babel thing at all.
That's funny because I'm a huge fan of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah.
And they have something called a Babel fish, where it's like a little fish you put in your ear and just instantly translates everything.
Really?
And yeah, like I've seen like different earphones that have come out that claim to do this, but like I was saying, read on Reddit the comments, so I was like, no, the technology's not there yet. But yeah, that was the communication with anyone in the world, because I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of languages there are, but that'd be fantastic. But yeah, it's just interesting because languages, there's not even exact translations for everything. So So it'd be interesting to see how that actually takes place. But like, I don't know, like Google Translate gets better and better every year. Like just typing that in alone. So if you could get that in real time, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
And just like have a Google phone, just its ability to recognize my voice and what I'm saying, like, is fantastic. I love it.
Harking back to like earlier points of this discussion, is that there's like a lot of privacy issues and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But I think that comes with any new technology. There's like issues. So like if we like set those aside for a second, like speech recognition in general, speech recognition, speech translation, I think is going to be big.
Right. Get a lot, because like right now people have at least phones. Like a lot of people have phones, Alexas. I know we're talking about third world countries, so it's not as populous there as many applications and devices.
Yeah.
But yeah, just like everyone's carrying around a device nowadays. So like if you can compile that data, maybe anonymize it in some way, private keys on the blockchain, like you could get a lot of data. What I like too is like how people like, I have my phone, it'll take pictures I took 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and like do facial recognition. And so it's like, it'll take pictures of when I'm a baby and put it in my little like Brett category,
right? Which
is odd. Like you never take people from the background. So it gets data that you wouldn't even think was there, like at the time, not useful. So like everything I type in, I'm like, this can be used at some point. Like even if it's not relevant now, they can come up with the algorithms or the processing power to actually like make something out of this, which I think is super interesting.
As long as the data is organized, it's like anytime you need it, you'll be able to access it. Which is great. I also like a technology which like, you know, not really related to deep learning, but like probably will use deep learning is virtual reality and like augmented reality. I think is going to be really fun. I'm excited to see what applications actually come out of it.
Right. Because
right now it's more of the fun. I think there's like a lot of cool use cases that can be thought of.
Right.
I'm excited. Like one thing that just I think for me would be unreal is like taking a history class where you like put on goggles and like get transported to 3rd century like Byzantine Empire or like Rome or something like that. That is just like to me like such a better learning experience than reading a textbook. Like I watch some like historical like half fiction, half nonfiction shows, and like the kind of the details that they go into, like these are details that are like written down probably in books, like how people like go about their day-to-day lives and like the type of like tools that they use, but it's not something that like when I read it in a book like really makes an impact on me.
To actually live and see it.
Like see like a video of like the occupation that people have or like the different like the clothes that they wear.
Yeah, no, I'm a huge fan of augmented reality. That's one of my favorite things coming out that I hope they get to work. I'm sure at some point, like, I'm very interested, like, magically hoping that they come through with their billions of dollars to create something awesome. It's so difficult. So I'm working on a project where we use, like, augmented reality in a car, for, like, talking about autonomous vehicles, like, how people would use that. And, like, the HoloLens is probably the most prolific augmented reality set right now. Is if you're driving you're sitting in a car driving, it doesn't work because the car's moving but you're not moving and it's not there yet. It doesn't know what's going on, so it just like doesn't work. It's like super interesting. So like, but talking about applications, I've like subscribed to subreddits about augmented reality. One of them I've seen recently is it knows your food preferences, or like I'm gluten free, so it was showing that you're looking in the cereal aisle at cereal boxes and it puts X's over the ones that you can't eat or don't want to eat, and then like Cheerios come up like check mark, like that's the one for you because you know. And so it uses the vision aspect of it, like a design like hackathon sort of thing a couple weeks ago in Israel and the Technion, and it was just basically like, have the craziest ideas, like think of the most. Like we ended up like buying Google for their data at the end of it, like. But one of our idea was like using augmented reality and using basically it was a tourism based idea, like come up with the best idea for tourism, and it's that you're in a place, use augmented reality, like put you on a path and start you on a certain way to like follow someone else's path and stuff like that. You could actually like, if you're the first person to find something, like that could be your artifact, like save it on the blockchain and you can see it later. But what I thought was really cool was the idea that if you're recording everything, like at some point that becomes history. You can actually like live through history. Like 100 years from now, if we're recording all these experiences, you can step into someone's experience.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the reason why the Rome thing, like going back to Rome, can only work to a certain extent is we don't have data.
Right.
We don't have visual data on Rome. But yeah, 100 years from now, like, history classes will be like all the data that we have now on the world. I completely agree. That's exciting.
People walking through, living history, creating history. People are wearing augmented reality. They have cameras. Like, we already have our phones that camera, but have them always on. Get all that data. Like we're saying, like eventually we'll figure out how to use this data as long as we store it. Like unlimited stuff. You can recreate everything. So I like the Black Mirror episodes that are very like tech heavy, and you can see all the cool little like people going deep on thinking of these different things.
What's your favorite Black Mirror episode?
The one that comes to mind is like Christmas special. Spoilers alert! Like just the fact that taking consciousness and putting it into a machine. I always think like if they can do that, they can do a ton more things that they don't show in the show. But yeah, being able to like put someone in, like take someone's consciousness and be able to use it. I'm very much like past augmented reality. I'm very interested in brain controlled interfaces. Like a lot of them are invasive right now, but they have things where people can like they have to do experiments on monkeys where they move cursors with their minds. And that's like years old already. There's a lot of cool stuff. There's a company I'm looking at, Neurable, that uses an HTC Vive and connects like a EEG machine to your head, like it's a little helmet thing that you can control VR games. I think like the mixture of virtual reality, augmented reality, and brain controlled interfaces that you can like have your own world, create your own like world, control it. You can control the real world, especially if you have augmented stuff or Internet of Things connected. You can how many times like I just want this like this can to like come to me, or like you know like you can actually create that reality. When like then there's like what's actually real, versus what's not, and finding clothes that you like smart mirrors. I think like Angela's working on a startup like the show is like how you look in different clothing, and just to be able to. I was thinking like that, and like you could send it to your friends. Like, do you like this shirt? Like, should I get it? And then like when you go on like the virtual scale, like you don't even need to buy real clothes, and people are buying like augmented like digital things. Or you can play games where everyone's a wizard, and you just have like I see everyone in wizard costumes. Like there's like endless possibilities in that realm. So I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, maybe you buy like something akin to a QR code, right? On your shirt, where like when people see that QR code, that's what your shirt appears like to them, right? Yeah,
it's just like a world of white walls and like white clothing, just like overlays stuff. Like there's I don't even know who produced the video. I see like connected through Reddit on YouTube where someone's walking through, they got ads going everywhere, and they're in a supermarket, like you want to use your credits for this, like all augmented, and like there's like a bug or something, it shuts down for a second, just like very silent, and like all these like blank stuff everywhere. Yeah. It's just like interesting to see how that actually pans out, because there's so many different ways it can go, and depending how the technology is hard. Like it's very difficult to mix the virtual world into the real world. Like one of the best examples that works well is the yellow line in football. Like the first down line in football, like because someone's standing in front of that line, it blocks it, and it goes under and knows like where to be on the field, and just like to do that for everything in real life, and it's hard. And to see like how fast you're moving, to see do these things collide, what happens when a virtual thing collides with a real thing, and all that. It's hard to like discern, especially with like one, maybe two cameras, but to do it live. I think going to concerts, but not actually being at the concert, being able to like everyone has a front and center view.
Yeah,
like,
I think that's one of the like kind of obvious like a virtual reality, like watching the NBA finals from half court, like floor side half court, without actually
or
going.
As like LeBron, you know, like they wear goggles sometimes, anyways, like the little camera on them, like it's endless possibilities. Yeah, and like jumping back, other thing, like autonomous vehicles, I'm super excited for, because it now makes the car another room, right? Yeah. It's no longer just a place to go A to B. You could get in the car, like we're in New York, we go like, all right, I'm gonna go to San Francisco, take a couple of days straight, maybe stop for bathroom breaks and food, but you have an entertainment center in your car where you're on the internet doing stuff, working.
Or something.
Yeah, like that could be your home. Yeah, a gym, you could work out in there. It's basically like endless possibilities again of another room where you can be connected to the internet and do stuff.
Yeah.
Which is like
imagine like on your like morning commute, getting in your workout to work.
Yeah. Yeah, and they no longer need to be like front facing, like out, because no one's driving. It can be more like a limo or like a party bus where everything's for the middle, and like telecommunications and all that. And yeah, you can send send my dog up to a different city to visit. Like I'll fly, but I'll send my dog in a car. And it's just anything is possible. You could just like wake up in a car like after a night of drinking, like shit, I'm on my way to Boston right now. Like okay, like hang out in Boston. Like you no longer like are tied down. I feel like people, like maybe it's like a lot of fleet cars that are coming, so you'll like rent like Uber sort of model, which is interesting because Uber, they're really good because they don't need to own cars, so it's gonna be interesting to see like people like the ownership of cars, the whole spectrum of like no, like I still like having a trunk and keeping my things in my car, so when I'm in there I have all my things, versus like no, I just need to get from somewhere right now to somewhere else.
Yeah,
like I feel like New York would definitely be a lot of no one owning cars, but like Texas or somewhere with a lot, like California where everyone drives, like a lot more of that.
Definitely, car ownership is going to change.
Flying cars as well, it'd be insane. Like you no longer need, like if you're in Colorado in the mountains, it takes half hour to get around the mountain, and you could be there in 5 minutes. Just whoop, like no more like traffic. Everyone has their own like destination path, straight shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Airbus has this like concept video where like the central mode of transportation is like some like cubicle. And then like that cubicle can be put on wheels. It can be put like on these like quadcopter like wings, and like you can kind of move from like
modular sort of modes of transportation. Modular transportation. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And the good thing with cubes is you can stack them. Like make bigger cubes. Like, a huge problem with transportation now is like the average occupancy of a vehicle is like 1.2 people. Like most cars, they have 5 seats or more, and it's one person in there, maybe 2 people. Yeah. And so that causes a lot of traffic congestion. You can have vehicles that are one-person cars, or like combine and make a 2-person car, like combine like a trunk storage. A lot of different possibilities.
Pay for each like extra addition.
Yeah, or rent it temporarily. Like a lot of interesting stuff. It'd be very exciting to see how they play out. Thank you for tuning in to the Style is Free podcast. We hit so many topics this episode on so many different technologies and how they're going to affect the future. And we're going to dive deeper into each one of those in future episodes. So thanks again for tuning in. This is the Style is Free podcast. I am your host, Brett Liebowitz.